The Women of 1862. I'm your trainer, Lori Coffey. One of the thousands of nurses who might have assisted Dr. Mary was a celebrated and daring Annie Etheridge. A blue-eyed beauty from Michigan, Lorinda Anna Blair, simply called Annie, was born to a Catholic neighborhood in 1839. The Detroit and Pontiac Railroad was just completed, and the first trains were still horse-drawn. Annie grew up with an older father, a blacksmith repairman from New York, whose first wife's children, John, who became a postman, and Lucinda, who became a carpet weaver, Annie knew and remembered in her will. Her mother, Cynthia, had been a 28-year-old spinster when the blacksmith asked for her hand. Yes, yes. Annie was a big sister to Elsie and little Edwin, who grew up to be a house painter. Anna had to help nurse her sometimes ailing father all her life, while her mother, Cynthia, took care of the younger kids, plus young boarders who helped pay the bills. When her father died, she took her nursing skills to St. Mary's, then the only hospital in Detroit, under the supervision of Dr. Vlemke and the Sisters of Charity. The newly rebuilt structure could accommodate 150 patients and take in the county's indigents. Knowing what quality healthcare looked like, she grew passionate about providing it. At 21, though, she married James Etheridge, second son of a middle-class clothier, and the couple settled down nearby. It was 1860. How do you suppose this marriage is going to turn out? Just a year later, the war broke out. Annie Etheridge decided to enlist, as she thought combat would be preferable to being the wife of James Etheridge. James, by the way, enlisted in 63 and deserted 7 months later. Annie, on the other hand, enlisted in 61 under Colonel Francis William Kellogg, no relation to the cereal, but he was the governor. She signed up as a regiment's vivandière with the heavily French Catholic 2nd Michigan Infantry. What was a vivandière? A cook, a saleswoman, or a washerwoman? What do you think? All three. It was a vendor. Between the battles, she would acquire and sell sundries to the regiment, also called a sutler. Annie sold to the men playing cards, combs, soap, sewing kits called housewife, tins of matches called lucifers, handkerchiefs called face mops, musical instruments, and other small useful items like pencils, remedies, and shirts. At their first conflict, Blackburn's Ford, Virginia, Annie watched in horror as the men suffered on the field. Her nursing skills took over and she joined the fray, providing water and nursing aid in the midst of the combat. The men found her a gentle caregiver of uncompromising spirit and extraordinary bravery. She became known as Gentle Annie. Arming herself with pistols and a saddlebag of medical supplies for dressing wounds and relieving pain, Annie was so attentive to the wounded, she was nearly captured more than once. After the Battle of Antietam, Annie stayed with the Army of the Potomac, and her battle-scarred one-armed leader, General Philip Kearny, known as the Magnificent, for leading a charge with his sword in one hand and reining his horse with his teeth. General Kearny saw her bravery and recommended this battlefield nurse be given a horse and the rank of sergeant. He didn't know that Annie was an unpaid and unpensioned volunteer. At least she got the horse. At the disastrous Battle of Chancellorsville, her horse was shot out from under her. A cowardly officer tried to hide behind her skirts. He was killed. She was wounded in the hand. The next morning, finding a new mount, Annie rode up to the general and his staff with a sack of hardtack and a dozen canteens filled with hot coffee. The men implored her to leave for her own safety, but she insisted on remaining until each of the men ate and drank his fill. While she waited, 3 more horses were shot. Yet, as a nearby soldier wrote, she never flinched nor betrayed the slightest fear. Later, in a Union artillery battery with serious casualties, the soldiers were ready to leave their ordnance and flee, but she encouraged them and talked them out of it. The gunners cheered her and insisted that she leave for her safety, and then they returned to their stations. One soldier wrote, "That brave little sergeant in petticoats bucked up our morale more than any officer could have done." General Kearny also had designed the Kearny Cross, a battlefield medal to be awarded to Union officers who had performed acts of extreme bravery and heroism in the face of the enemy. One of the oldest military decorations of the U.S. Army, it was awarded to Annie by Kearny's replacement when the one-armed general was killed in battle. Annie became a familiar sight in 32 battles throughout the war. She saved hundreds of lives, showing courage and heroism while literally running through the battlefront. Her dresses were constantly stained with blood, her skirts riddled with bullet holes. On foot or on horseback, she would bob and weave to reach the wounded, even darting in front of a pointed gun to do so. Some said she captured several prisoners. She served throughout the entire war, through to Lee's surrender in April of 65. Now living in Washington, D.C., called District of Columbia, no longer Washington City, she earned a coveted job in the growing Treasury Department, earning $900, about $20,000 today. But the job was taken from her and given to a man. She took it in stride because after all the destruction and death she had seen, at 26, she finally found love and married the former Corporal Charles E. Hooks, a one-armed night watchman whom Annie called my dear husband. This one lasted. On September 5th in 1870, he made a $100 deposit, about $2,200 today, in Annie's name at the new U.S. Freedmen's Savings Bank, a private corporation established in 1865 by Congress for former slaves, including veterans and nurses, to deposit their newly earned capital. Unfortunately, mismanaged by Henry Cook, board overseer, plus the Panic of 1873, resulted in the bank's failure, causing more than 60,000 African Americans to lose their life savings, the most vulnerable wage earners. In 1886, at 47, the battle-scarred Annie, now a widow, formally requested a pension of $50 a month for her wartime services. Congress approved half that. Happily, she thrived. She was active in the Ladies Union Veteran Legion, a group of women veterans who had all volunteered during the war for at least 3 years. They prepared to give visiting veterans a warm reception for their upcoming national encampment coming to town. The news article promised the reception to be an event long remembered. Annie served on the hotels committee. She was also active in her church, Sacred Heart. She even traveled back to Michigan in 1891 to be lauded by the regiment veterans and march with the boys in Detroit one last time. While she got along well with soldiers, volunteers, church workers, and friends, family was another matter. She had a strained relationship with her sister Elsie and her children, who all moved to Washington after Annie did. Her will clearly spells out the frost. She writes, "My sister, nieces, and nephew named in this will have never visited me or shown me any kindness or consideration, and therefore do not deserve any consideration. I make the following bequests to them. To my sister Elsie Parsons, $1. To my niece Viola Parsons, $1. To my niece Edna Parsons, $1. To my nephew Herbert Parsons, $1. To my niece Mrs. Bertha Parsons Smith, my jewelry, including my watch, chain, and 2 rings, my family pictures, my personal clothing as she desires, and the sum of $100. By the way, Bertha, the good child, lived to reach 100. I do this as genealogy. It's like, whoa. Annie goes on to give her friends and various people at Sacred Heart $100 or more, plus $500 for their school's chapel. She gave to her half-brother and half-sister equal portions of her funeral plot. She wouldn't be needing it. What? Hers was awaiting her in Arlington. In 1913, the brave Sergeant in petticoats died at age 73. With veterans' honor, she was buried with her dear husband. Today, she is remembered in several books, the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame, and a Daughters of the Union Veterans of the Civil War detached tent in Florida. That's how I learned about her.